there. This is part 2 about Grand Central, so I'll do a fast recap. This is the main concourse. In front, there's a maybe invisible statue standing 17.5 feet tall. It's of Cornelius Vanderbilt, rags to $250 billion of today's dollars. He made his first fortune in shipping. They called him the Commodore. The right man for when the Erie Canal made New York's economy explode. Later, Vanderbilt sold all his ships and moved into railroads. He bought the New York and Harlem, the only railroad into Manhattan. He built, owned, and then closed the only railroad bridge over the Hudson River. The New York Central Railroad got born, and it made his fortune explode. City law stopped its steam engines from going south of 26th Street, and now you're sort of up to speed. A new law moved steam engines to 42nd Street, so Vanderbilt built, Grand Central Depot. It served 3 of Vanderbilt's railroads, each with their own separate everythings. It was the most important station in the country, 21 acres, 170 trains a day, and it was instantly obsolete. Its train shed was the nation's second most visited site after the U.S. Capitol. As the trains arrived, the engines detached. The trains coasted in. The engines then went back on the other end. The depot was rebuilt 28 years later. Same footprint. 3 new stories. Hard to tell, right? But, and there's always a but, it was inadequate to handle the 500 daily trains almost from the day it opened. The train shed was still in the L of the building, one of the 19th century's most magnificent achievements, even when it was filled with smoke. The steam engines lived nearby, outside, in the train yard. That's where they smoked. Here's looking north towards 56th Street. They went up 4th Avenue. It was nicknamed Death Alley, or the Valley of the Shadow of Death. So what do you do to fix it? Charles T. Harvey, who's the father of New York's L, which is an elevated train, built a demo in 1867. That's him up there. By the way, 1878, the 3rd Avenue L went from South Street all the way to Grand Central Depot. Here's the terminal stop at the real terminal. By the way, later on, it became the IRT. Some proposed burying the tracks. Here's an 1860 vision of Broadway near Wall Street. London did that for real in 1863. This is their underground. Starting in 1875, they buried New York Central's tracks south of 97th Street. But, and here's another but, smoke filled the tunnel. There were lots of accidents. 1891's was horrible. 1802's was worse. Hundreds injured and 15 killed. The city government demanded the railroad do something, like electrification. 4 architectural firms were brought in and offered very different visions. McKim, Mead, and White, 65-story tall tower, an 18-story base. Reed and Stem's 18-story vision. Reed was the brother-in-law of the Central president. You think that mattered? From the north. That's Park Avenue with the train yard underneath. Vanderbilt's grandson got his cousin's firm, Warren and Whitmore involved. They decided to remove the tower. Reed and Stem did functional design. Warren and Whitmore, artistic, like the arches. Together, they were associated architects. By the way, Warren and Whitmore also designed Detroit's Michigan Central Station. It's now abandoned. It has 3 arches and a 12-story office building. Look familiar? They even debated routing Park Avenue cars right through Grand Central. They wound up putting the road around the building. Now, here's the front and west part of the second floor roadway. They put a huge grand ballroom up on the right where the light comes in. Here's the grand concourse being built. A big but invisible thing that they planned to do was bury the train yard and then put a city on top of it. Here's the train yard being buried. Lots of work. They dug down in sequence. The yard is 42 feet underground. Long distance trains go around the outside on what's called the balloon loop. They never have to back up. They just keep going straight. The tracks in the middle, though, they end. So it is a Grand Central Terminal. By the way, the tracks are on 2 levels. One is atop the other. When trains leave, they go downhill, so gravity helps them. On the way in, gravity slows them down. That's an invisible feature too. There are 48 platforms, plus 1 more. Grand Central is the world's biggest station. Well, you know, of course, it's a terminal. Platform 61, that's maybe a secret, is underneath the Waldorf Astoria. Legend says that this is President Franklin Roosevelt's car. Another New York legend says there's a ghost down there, a Fala, President Roosevelt's dog. By the way, Fala's name was a Battle of the Bulge GI password. The tracks are almost a maze. There's a special course for engineers on how to navigate them. 33 miles of them. Yet when you stand on Park Avenue, you see none. That's Park Avenue looking downtown towards Grand Central. I worked in several of those buildings. I wonder if the buildings remember me. It took 10 years to build the 3rd Grand Central. The baggage room is on the left. The main building is in front. I did say it took a while to build. Sunlight would stream into the grand concourse when they finished. It really did. Here's the concourse, filled with sunshine. The terminal at night. You see the 3 arches? What about the invisible statue? Remember it? It's right here. There's also one other invisible thing in this picture. An eagle from Grand Central Depot. There were about a dozen on the depot. 2 remain on Grand Central. 13-foot wingspan, cast iron, 4,000 pounds each. Let's go inside now. For 100 years, New Yorkers would say, "Meet me under the clock." They didn't mean the Glory of Commerce sculpture that was the world's largest. Yes, it has a clock, the world's largest Tiffany one. It's 14 feet across. By the way, the 4 is I, not IV. This is the clock up on the main information booth. An urban legend says each of its 4 faces is made from solid opal and it's worth some 20 mil. Yeah, right. No. By the way, all Grand Central clocks are set 1 minute fast to give travelers an extra 60 seconds to make their trains. The concourse is the most famous feature of Grand Central. The information booth is in the middle. You see it a lot better during a blizzard. Grand Central is and was hugely important, like in World War II. Here's the world's largest photo mural from back then. The suburban concourse is underneath the main concourse. This is about a quarter of it. Here's a different view. You walk down a ramp to get there. Ramps were hugely important. They're 8 degrees. You don't take stairs. That's how you get to the trains. They were a major, major innovation, and they're almost invisible. This ramp's bottom has an invisible secret you can hear. The whispering gallery. The tiled ceiling takes sounds to the opposite corner. Just beyond the whispering gallery is the 1913 Oyster Bar. They sell some 5 million oysters each year. A fire devastated it in 1997. 14 employees then bought it, thank God. I've taken most of our 13 or 14 sons and daughters to Grand Central. Here's Alicia and Laya, or is it Laya and Alicia? They know their names. A guy asked if we needed help. With the 2 girls there, I had to be careful. I asked them where passengers went for trips to and from Chicago. By the way, the train looked just like that. See? New York to Chicago in 16 hours on the world's most famous train, the 20th Century Limited. It left New York at 6 p.m. They updated the train. Here it's leaving Chicago, and they created red carpet service in New York. They put a red carpet along the platform. Red carpet treatment. That's something you've heard of, and it's known around the world. The train to and from Chicago made you go through the Biltmore Room. It was called the kissing room. Kisses had to be 5 seconds or less, and that was enforced by terminal employees. And in that room, a vendor walked back and forth. The floor remembers his 50 years of footsteps. There's actually a depression on the back wall. The guy who offered to help us was the station master. He's nicknamed the mayor of Grand Central. His name is Mr. Kelly. He took us up the secret staircase. He also took us to the 2 tennis courts, which are in the old ballroom. It had later on been converted to become CBS Studios number 41, 42, 43, and 44. What's My Line was filmed there for 17 straight years. Speaking of What's My Line, here's another almost secret. Who is Mr. Campbell, and why is his apartment in Grand Central? It overlooks the concourse. Today it's a bar, and it's still a magnificent room. By the way, Grand Central's Grand Ballroom was larger than the one in Atlantic City's Convention Center. The arena and the ballroom both had huge organs. A hurricane killed them. They're being restored. We've a video on it. In Grand Central, there was a lady named Mary Lou Reed who played an organ for 31 years. She played the Star-Spangled Banner once and only once, on December 7th, 1941. Everybody stood at attention, and they all missed their trains. Up there, you now see the 9/11 flag. Besides trains, Grand Central had art and an actual school of art. One of the greatest painters of the day helped found it, John Singer Sargent. Grand Central had a movie theater too. A wine shop is in the space now, but if you look at the ceiling, it remembers. The walls all around remember too. Acorns are everywhere if you see them. Cornelius's motto, "From an acorn grows a mighty oak." It's strange to see bare light bulbs in the terminal. Look closely. They're everywhere, some 4,000 of them, and they all have acorns. It was the dawn of electric lights, and they wanted to show theirs off. They've all now been converted to LEDs. Speaking of electricity, there's a secret underground room for the electrical converters. In World War II, you'd have been shot if you tried to break into them. Now, part 3 is coming, and it is more of the story, including Terminal City and Penn Station. Tell us what you think in the comments. Until the next one. Bye now.
Thank you